Pay attention to this security camera footage. March 10th, 2024. Private residence, birthday celebration. The camera captures a warm, elegantly decorated living room, string lights twinkling across the windows, colorful balloons, guests mingling with champagne flutes and red cups, and there in the center of the room, you see them. An elderly woman with cropped silver hair in a flowing champagne gold dress. A tall, athletic black man in a navy tuxedo. They're dancing slowly, tenderly. He leans in, kisses her. Some guests in the background turn to look. Their expressions range from warm smiles to discomfort to whispered judgment. This footage was pulled from a home security system, her own home. A celebration of her 72nd birthday, and it was sent to two men who would watch it with rage. Within 12 days, the young man in that footage would be dead, buried in the woods. The elderly woman would die believing he had abandoned her for money. And when the truth emerged, an entire family would be destroyed. The people who sent this video to her sons, they were standing in that very room, smiling, holding champagne. In the next 40 minutes, you're going to see how a birthday dance became evidence in a murder conspiracy. April 15th, 2024, 6:47 a.m. Wesley Thornton had been hiking these woods for 15 years. Every spring, same trail, same routine. 35 miles outside the city, deep in the Ridgewood Conservation Area, where the oaks grow thick and the morning fog settles like a secret. He noticed the smell first. That sour, unmistakable rot that made his stomach turn before his brain could register what it meant. Wesley stopped walking, looked around. The earth ahead looked wrong, disturbed, uneven, covered with branches that didn't fall naturally. They'd been placed, deliberately. He stepped closer, and then he saw it. A hand, partially exposed through the dirt, decomposed, gray-green flesh clinging to bone. Wesley Thornton stumbled backward, his hiking boots catching on a root. He fumbled for his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. Police arrived at 7:32 a.m. By 8:15, the area was cordoned off with yellow tape. By noon, forensic teams had carefully excavated what remained of a human body. Male, late 20s, athletic build. He'd been in the ground approximately 3 to 4 weeks. Dental records provided identification by 4 p.m. that same day. Damon Whitfield, 28 years old, physical therapist at Westbrook Rehabilitation Center. Unreported missing March 24th by a woman named Evelyn Carrington, listed as his emergency contact. Last confirmed sighting, March 22nd, leaving work at 7:48 p.m. He'd been dead in these woods the entire time police were searching. The medical examiner's preliminary report painted a brutal picture. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the skull combined with manual strangulation. Someone had hit him from behind, hard, then finished the job with their hands. But Damon hadn't gone quietly. Defensive wounds covered his hands and forearms. Skin cells were found beneath his fingernails. He'd fought back. He'd clawed at his attacker. He'd tried to survive. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was murder, calculated, planned, personal. Detective Angela Morrison stood at the edge of the gravesite, studying the scene. Did 22 years on the force, 14 in homicide. She'd seen bodies dumped in woods before, usually drug deals, gang disputes, crimes of passion buried in panic. But this felt different. The burial was too deliberate, the location too remote. Whoever did this had scouted the area, had taken their time, had expected Damon Whitfield to stay hidden forever. Who reported him missing? Morrison asked her partner. Woman named Evelyn Carrington, 71 years old. Morrison raised an eyebrow. 71? Listed as his girlfriend. His girlfriend? Her partner handed her the missing persons file. Morrison flipped through it. Damon Whitfield, young, handsome, no criminal record, no known enemies. Evelyn Carrington, widow, wealthy, lived alone in a 6-bedroom house in Wellington Estates, and the address alone told Morrison everything about the money involved. What's a 28-year-old physical therapist doing with a 71-year-old woman worth? Morrison checked the notes. $8.8 million? That's the question, isn't it? Morrison closed the file. Who inherits if she dies? 2 sons. Garrett Carrington, 50. Lawrence Carrington, 47. And if the boyfriend's in the picture? According to her attorney, she changed her will 2 months ago, left most of it to some cancer research fund. Sons got cut from $4 million each, down to $600,000. Morrison looked back at the shallow grave, at the decomposed remains of a young man who'd been beaten and strangled and buried like garbage. "Find the sons," she said. Today. But here's what Detective Morrison didn't know yet. What she would spend the next 3 weeks uncovering. What would eventually be revealed in a courtroom that September. This wasn't just about Damon Whitfield. This is about Evelyn Carrington, a 71-year-old widow worth $8.8 million who fell in love with a 28-year-old physical therapist, a woman who found happiness after decades of loneliness, who chose love over judgment, who trusted her own heart when the world told her she was foolish. This is about 2 sons who decided their mother's happiness was worth less than their inheritance, who looked at their mother dancing with a younger man and saw only dollar signs slipping away, who convinced themselves that murder was a reasonable solution to a problem that existed only in their greed. And this is about a lie, a single, devastating lie that would kill Evelyn Carrington more surely than any weapon. Because by the time Wesley Thornton found that hand in the woods, Evelyn was already dead. She died 15 days earlier, alone, in her bedroom, believing the man she loved had abandoned her for money. She never knew he'd refused a $250,000 bribe to leave her. She never knew he'd been murdered for that refusal. She never knew he loved her until his last breath. She died believing she was a fool, and her sons watched it happen. To understand how Damon Whitfield ended up in that shallow grave, and why Evelyn Carrington died of a broken heart, you need to understand who they were before they found each other. 2 people shaped by loss. 2 people surviving, not living. 2 people the world had forgotten. Damon Whitfield never knew his parents, and he entered the foster care system at 3 days old, an unnamed infant left at a fire station in Baltimore with nothing but a thin blanket and a note that said, "I'm sorry." He bounced through 11 homes by the time he was 16. Some were decent, most were not. He learned early that love was temporary, that people leave, that the only person he could truly count on was himself. But Damon wasn't bitter. That was the remarkable thing about him. Despite everything, he believed in kindness. He worked his way through community college, earned a degree in physical therapy, and built a career helping people heal. He told a coworker once, "I know what it feels like to be broken. I just want to help people put themselves back together." At 23, Damon met Brianna Coleman. She was a nursing student with a laugh that filled every room she entered. They met at a hospital volunteer event and talked for 4 hours straight. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Damon had never felt so certain about anything in his life. Finally, he thought. Finally, he had a family, someone who would stay. They married in June 2021, a small ceremony, 20 guests. Brianna wore her grandmother's dress. Damon cried when he saw her walk down the aisle. 3 months later, Brianna started getting tired. Then came the pain, then the tests. Stage 3 ovarian cancer, aggressive, already spreading. The doctors gave her a year. She lasted 5 months. Damon held her hand through every chemotherapy session. He slept in hospital chairs. He learned to administer medications, to change IV bags, to read monitors. He watched the woman he loved, the only family he'd ever chosen, wither away in a hospital bed. Brianna died on January 14th, 2022. She was 26 years old. They'd been married for 8 months. Her last words to him, "Don't spend your life alone, Damon. Promise me. Find someone who makes you happy." He promised, but he didn't believe it. How could he? Everyone he'd ever loved had left, his parents, every foster family, and now Brianna. For the next year, Damon existed. He went to work. He helped patients recover. He went home to an empty apartment that still smelled like her perfume. He kept her toothbrush in the bathroom, her slippers by the bed. He couldn't throw them away. Throwing them away meant accepting she was gone. Damon Whitfield was 27 years old and already tired of living. Evelyn Carrington had spent 48 years being Theodore's wife. They met in 1972 at a pharmaceutical company picnic. She was a secretary. He was an ambitious young chemist. He asked her to dance. She said yes. They were married within a year. Theodore built an empire. Evelyn built a home. She raised 2 sons, Garrett and Lawrence, while Theodore worked 80-hour weeks and traveled the world. She didn't complain. That was the deal. He provided. She maintained. They were partners, if not always passionate. When Theodore retired in 2015, Evelyn thought they'd finally have time together. Travel, dinners, conversations that lasted longer than 15 minutes. But Theodore didn't know how to stop working. He spent his retirement in his home office, consulting, advising, doing everything except being present. On March 3rd, 2020, Theodore had a massive heart attack in that office. Evelyn found him slumped over his desk, still holding a pen. He was dead before the paramedics arrived. 48 years, gone in an instant. Evelyn expected grief. What she didn't expect was silence. Her sons came for the funeral. They stayed for the reading of the will, and then they vanished. Garrett called once a month, brief, perfunctory conversations that lasted less than 5 minutes. Lawrence called even less. Neither visited. Neither asked how she was doing. Neither seemed to notice that their mother was drowning in loneliness. In the fall of 2022, Evelyn sat with her oldest friend, Constance Palmer, on the back patio of her 6-bedroom house. The house felt enormous now, empty, like a museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. "When Theodore died," Evelyn said, on her voice hollow, "I thought my sons would check on me. I thought they'd call more, visit, something." She paused, stirring her tea without drinking it. Instead, they vanished. "I'm completely alone, Constance, and they're too busy counting what they'll inherit." That quote, those exact words, would be read aloud in a courtroom 2 years later. In October 2022, Evelyn's hip finally gave out. Years of arthritis, years of ignoring the pain. Surgery was scheduled. Recovery would require physical therapy. November 2022, Westbrook Rehabilitation Center. Evelyn arrived for her first session feeling invisible. 70 years old, widow, alone. Just another elderly patient shuffling through the system. And then Damon Whitfield walked into the room. He smiled at her. Not the polite, distant smile she'd grown used to. A real smile. Like he actually saw her. "Mrs. Carrington? I'm Damon. I'll be working with you." She looked into his eyes and felt, for the first time in years, like she existed. November 2022. Westbrook Rehabilitation Center. Evelyn Carrington had been invisible for 2 years. Not literally. People still saw her. They saw the designer clothes, the jewelry, the chauffeured car that dropped her off for appointments. They saw the widow of Theodore Carrington, pharmaceutical executive, estate worth $8.8 million. What they didn't see was Evelyn. Her sons didn't see her. Her friends from Theodore's world had slowly faded away. The invitations stopped coming, the phone calls grew shorter. The lunches were always rescheduled. Even her housekeeper, Maria, looked through her most days, completing tasks in silence. Evelyn had become furniture in her own life. Expensive, well-maintained, ignored. So when she arrived at Westbrook for her first physical therapy session after hip replacement surgery, she expected more of the same. Another professional who would handle her carefully, speak to her slowly, treat her like something fragile and slightly inconvenient. Then she met Damon Whitfield. He was young. She noticed that immediately. Late 20s, tall, athletic build, warm brown skin. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his body. But what struck her wasn't his appearance. It was his eyes. When he looked at her, he actually looked at her. Not at her jewelry, not at the intake form listing her husband's occupation. At her. "Mrs. Carrington, I'm Damon. I'll be working with you for the next 8 weeks. His voice was calm. A patient. No condescension, no false cheerfulness. "Evelyn," she said. "Please." He smiled. "Evelyn, let's see what we're working with." The first session was unremarkable. Assessment exercises, range of motion tests, standard questions about pain levels and mobility goals. But Evelyn noticed things. The way Damon explained each exercise before asking her to perform it. The way he adjusted his instructions when she struggled instead of repeating them louder, slower, as if she were a child. The way he celebrated small victories without being patronizing. 3 sessions per week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. By the second week, Evelyn found herself looking forward to them. It wasn't romantic. Not then. It was simpler than that. For 45 minutes, 3 times a week, someone paid attention to her. Someone noticed when she was tired. And someone asked how she was feeling and actually waited for the answer. December 12th, 2022. A Wednesday. Evelyn was struggling with a balance exercise, standing on one foot, eyes closed, counting to 10. Her body trembled. Her jaw clenched. At 7 seconds, she lost it, stumbled sideways, arms flailing. Damon caught her, steadied her, held on just long enough for her to find her footing. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I'm sorry, Don't apologize." His voice was gentle but firm. "You're stronger than you think. I can see it." Evelyn looked up at him. Something in her chest shifted, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," she whispered, and she meant it for more than just catching her. After that session, they talked. Really talked. Just 30 seconds at first. "Where are you from? How long have you been doing this? Do you enjoy it?" But those 30 seconds became 2 minutes, then 5. Then Evelyn was arriving 15 minutes early just to chat before they began. She learned he had no family. "Foster care," he said casually, like it didn't matter. Never knew his parents. No siblings. She learned he'd been married once, very young, but he didn't elaborate. And something in his eyes told her not to ask. Not yet. He learned she had 2 sons who never called. A husband who died suddenly, leaving her wealthy and alone. A house with 6 bedrooms and no one to fill them. Small talk became something else. Recognition. 2 lonely people discovering they weren't invisible to each other. January 2023. Evelyn's rehabilitation officially ended. Her hip was healing beautifully. Her mobility had improved beyond expectations. There was no medical reason to continue seeing Damon Whitfield. But on her final scheduled session, Evelyn lingered. She'd rehearsed this moment in her bathroom mirror that morning, feeling ridiculous, feeling hopeful, feeling terrified. "Damon!" She clasped her hands to stop them from shaking. "Would you consider private sessions? At my home? I'd pay your full rate, of course, Her voice faltered. "I'm not ready to stop." She didn't say what she really meant. "I'm not ready to be invisible again." Damon studied her for a long moment. Something passed across his face. Hesitation, maybe. Recognition. Understanding. "Monday," he said finally. "I can come Monday." January 30th, 2023. First private session at Evelyn Carrington's home. He arrived at 10 a.m. She'd had Maria prepare tea and pastries, and then sent Maria away for the morning. The house felt different with him in it. Warmer, less empty. They did the exercises. They talked. And when he left 3 hours later, Evelyn stood at her window watching his car disappear down the driveway. She didn't know yet that she loved him, but she knew something had begun. February 2023. The session stopped being about physical therapy. Oh, they still did the exercises. Evelyn's hip continued to strengthen. Her balance improved week by week. But somewhere between the stretches and the resistance bands, the conversation became the point. The healing became secondary to something neither of them could name. Evelyn found herself telling Damon things she hadn't told anyone. Not her sons, not Constance, not even Theodore when he was alive. She told him about the company picnic in 1972, where she met her husband. How Theodore had walked up to her with 2 cups of lemonade and said, "You look like someone who needs rescuing from small talk." She'd laughed. She'd said yes to a dance. 6 months later, she'd said yes to everything else. She told him about the early years, the tiny apartment, the 70-hour weeks, the way Theodore would come home exhausted but still ask about her day. She told him about watching her husband build an empire while she built a home, about the pride, the loneliness, the way success slowly became a wall between them. And she told him about the morning Theodore died, how she'd brought him coffee in his office, how he'd waved her away without looking up, how she'd found him 3 hours later, slumped over his desk, pen still in his hand. Damon listened. He didn't offer platitudes or try to fix anything. He just listened. And when Evelyn finished talking, her eyes wet, her voice hoarse, he said quietly, "That's a lot to carry alone." No one had ever said that to her before. One Friday in March, Evelyn turned the conversation. They were sitting in her sunroom, afternoon light streaming through the windows, tea growing cold between them. "I've told you everything about my life," she said, "but you never talk about yours." Damon's expression shifted. Something closed behind his eyes. "Not much to tell. I work. That's about it." "No family?" "Foster care." He said it casually like it was nothing. "Never knew my parents. No siblings." Evelyn's heart cracked. This young man, this kind, patient, beautiful young man, had grown up with no one, no mother to hold him, and no father to guide him, no brothers to fight with, no sisters to confide in, just systems, strangers, temporary homes that were never really home. "And now?" She heard the tremor in her own voice. "Do you have anyone?" Damon was quiet for a long time. The clock on the mantel ticked. Outside, a bird sang. Then, "I had a wife." Evelyn's breath caught. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer. She was 26. "Oh, Damon." The words came out broken. "I'm so sorry." "Brianna." His voice softened when he said her name. "We met in college. Married young. Too young, everyone said. But we knew." He stared at his hands. "She was diagnosed 3 months after our wedding. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. Already spreading. The doctors gave her a year. She lasted 5 months. Evelyn couldn't speak, couldn't move. I held her hand through every treatment, slept in hospital chairs, learned to change her IV bags. And then one night in January, she looked at me and said, "I'm tired, Damon. I'm so tired." And I told her it was okay, that she could rest. His voice cracked. She died in my arms 20 minutes later. The sunroom was silent. Evelyn reached across the space between them and took his hand. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. She just held on. Something shifted between them in that moment. The professional boundary dissolved. The age gap became irrelevant. They weren't therapist and client anymore. They were two people who understood what it meant to love someone completely and lose them anyway. Two people who knew the specific weight of grief that never fully lifts. Evelyn pulled away in May. She stopped scheduling sessions, stopped returning Damon's calls. For 2 weeks, she disappeared into her empty house, pacing the hallways at night, arguing with herself in the mirror. "This is ridiculous. You're 71 years old, he's 28. People will think you've lost your mind. Your sons will be humiliated. The world will laugh at you. But another voice, quieter, braver, kept asking, when was the last time you felt alive? On May 17th, Damon's car pulled into her driveway. Evelyn watched from the window as he walked to her front door. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. When she opened the door, he was standing there with no pretense, no excuse. You stopped calling, he said. I know. Why? Evelyn looked at him, this young man who had lost everything and still somehow remained kind, who had seen her, who had listened, who had made her feel for the first time in years like she mattered. Because I was starting to feel things I shouldn't feel. Damon didn't flinch, didn't look away. I've been feeling the same way. They stood there in the doorway, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. Two lonely people, two broken hearts, one impossible choice. Evelyn stepped aside. Damon walked in. They chose happiness. They built a world no one else could see. June 2023. The summer stretched out before them like a promise. Damon started coming over 3 times a week, then 4, then every day he wasn't working. They kept it quiet. No public dinners, no social announcements, no explanations. Just the two of them in Evelyn's sprawling house, filling rooms that had been empty for years. Damon cooked for her. That surprised Evelyn most. And this young man who'd grown up in foster homes, who'd never had a real kitchen until adulthood, had taught himself to make meals that tasted like love. He'd stand at her stove making pasta from scratch, sauce simmering, music playing from his phone, artists Evelyn had never heard of, songs that made him bob his head and smile. Who is this? She'd ask, setting the table. Frank Ocean. You'd like him. She did. In return, Evelyn introduced him to Casablanca, to Roman Holiday, to the films she'd watched as a girl, dreaming of romance before she knew what romance cost. They'd curl up in her home theater, this 71-year-old woman and this 28-year-old man, and watch Audrey Hepburn fall in love while the credits rolled. She reminds me of you, Damon said once. Evelyn laughed. I'm 40 years too old for that comparison. No. He looked at her seriously. The elegance, the way she carries herself like she knows exactly who she is. Evelyn didn't know how to respond. Theodore had never said things like that. They walked her garden at sunset. They talked until midnight. They discovered the small, ordinary intimacies that make a relationship real. Damon learned that Evelyn couldn't stand cilantro. Evelyn learned that Damon always slept on the left side of the bed. She found out he still kept Brianna's voicemails on his phone. He found out she talked to Theodore's photograph every morning. Neither judged. Neither tried to replace what was lost. They simply made room for something new. In August, Evelyn tried to buy him a car. His 12-year-old Honda had broken down twice that summer, and she'd found herself worrying every time he drove home late. Let me do this, she said. Please. I have more money than I know what to do with. Damon looked at her for a long moment. Then he took her hands. I don't need your money, Evelyn. I just need you. He meant it. That was the thing her sons would never understand, the thing that would eventually get him killed. He meant it. October 2023. Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, thinking about death. Not morbidly, practically. She was 71. Her mother had died at 74. Her father at 76. The math wasn't complicated. Her current will, drafted in 2019, split everything between Garrett and Lawrence. $4.4 million each. At the time, it seemed right. They were her sons, her blood, and the heirs to everything she and Theodore had built. But that was before 2 years of silence, before birthday cards that arrived 3 days late with nothing but a signature, before phone calls that lasted 4 minutes and contained no real words, before she realized her sons saw her not as their mother, but as an obstacle between them and their inheritance. They didn't deserve it. The next morning, Evelyn called Howard Feldstein, her attorney for 30 years. Feldstein was cautious. He'd handled enough contested estates to know how families fractured over money. When Evelyn explained what she wanted, to reduce her son's shares and leave most of her fortune to cancer research, he didn't try to talk her out of it, but he insisted on documentation. "Your sons will challenge this," he said. "They'll claim undue influence. A diminished capacity. We need to prove beyond any doubt that you know exactly what you're doing." 2 independent physicians examined Evelyn. Dr. Patricia Hollis, geriatric psychiatrist. Dr. Raymond Watts, neuropsychologist. Comprehensive cognitive testing, interviews, assessments. Their conclusions documented in detail. Evelyn Carrington was of completely sound mind, sharp, articulate, fully capable of making her own decisions. February 2024. The new will was drafted. $600,000 to Garrett, $600,000 to Lawrence, $600,000 to Damon, and $7 million to establish the Brianna Whitfield Memorial Fund for Ovarian Cancer Research. Evelyn added one more clause. Feldstein thought it was unusual, but she insisted. If any person is convicted of any crime related to the harm or death of Damon Whitfield, all bequests to that person are void. The funds transfer automatically to the Brianna Whitfield Memorial Fund. Feldstein raised an eyebrow. "You're expecting trouble?" Evelyn thought of her sons, of the greed she'd seen in their eyes at Theodore's funeral, of the way they'd circled her estate like vultures. "I'm preparing for it." March 8th, 2024. Evelyn signed the will, 2 witnesses, notarized, legal. She drove home feeling lighter than she had in years. Her money would save lives. It would honor Damon's wife. It would mean something. 2 days later, she would throw herself a birthday party, and everything would begin to end. March 10th, 2024. Evelyn woke up at dawn and watched the sun rise through her bedroom window. 72 years old. She'd outlived her mother by 1 year, outlived her father by none. Every birthday now felt borrowed, time she wasn't promised, a time she refused to waste. She'd hosted this party for 30 years, same house, same guest list more or less, friends who'd known her since the children were small, neighbors who remembered Theodore, a few colleagues from his pharmaceutical days who still sent Christmas cards. Safe people. Predictable people. People who expected champagne and finger foods and Evelyn in pearls playing the gracious widow. This year would be different. "Are you sure about this?" Damon had asked her the night before. They were lying in the dark, his arm around her, her head against his chest. "I'm sure. People will talk. Let them." She'd turned to face him. "It's my birthday. My home. My life. I'm done apologizing for being happy." The caterers arrived at noon. By 6, the house glowed. String lights wound around the windows. Balloons clustered in corners. Not the somber silver and white of recent years, but bright colors. Joyful colors. Music played from the living room speakers, something with a beat, something that made Evelyn tap her foot while she checked the champagne. Guests arrived in waves. Constance came first, hugging Evelyn tight, whispering, "You look radiant." Old friends from the country club, a couple from down the street, Theodore's former business partner, now widowed himself. They all kissed her cheek, handed her gifts, complimented the decorations. No one mentioned how alive she seemed, how different. Damon arrived at 7. He stood in the doorway in a navy tuxedo. Evelyn had insisted he dress up, and he'd rolled his eyes but agreed. When she saw him, her breath caught. He looked nervous. He looked beautiful. "It's happy birthday," he said softly. She took his hand and led him inside. The room noticed. Of course it did. Conversations paused. Eyes followed them. Evelyn felt the weight of every stare, every raised eyebrow, every whispered question. Who is that? Why is he here? Is that her? No, it couldn't be. She didn't care. For the first time in her life, she genuinely didn't care. The music shifted. Something slow. Damon looked at her, uncertain, but Evelyn pulled him toward the center of the living room. They began to dance, his hand warm on her back, her head tilted up to meet his eyes. "Everyone's watching," he murmured. "Good. Let them see." They swayed together while the room held its breath. Some guests smiled, genuine warmth, maybe even envy. Others looked away, uncomfortable. A few exchanged glances loaded with judgment. How sad. How inappropriate. She's lost her mind. None of it touched Evelyn. She was dancing with the man she loved, in the home she'd built, surrounded by string lights and music, and the stubborn, defiant joy of being alive. "I love you," Damon whispered. "I love you too." He leaned down. She rose up. They kissed. In the corner of the room, Linda Ashford lowered her champagne glass and raised her phone. Linda had been Theodore's secretary for 23 years, a family friend, someone Evelyn had trusted with scheduling and correspondence and Christmas card lists, someone who still sent birthday wishes every March, still attended every party, still smiled like she belonged. She recorded 10 seconds of footage. The elderly woman in champagne gold, the young black man in navy, the kiss, the watching crowd. And then she slipped into the hallway and typed a message to Garrett Carrington. "Thought you should see what's happening at your mother's house." She attached the video. She pressed send. She returned to the party and refilled her glass. March 11th, 10:23 a.m. Garrett Carrington sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through his phone while his coffee grew cold. He saw Linda's name, opened the message. The video played. His expression moved through confusion, then recognition, then something darker. His jaw tightened. His hand gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. He called Lawrence. "You need to see something, now." By evening, both brothers stood in Evelyn's foyer. She'd been reading in the sunroom when they arrived unannounced, the first time either son had visited in months. "Mom." Garrett's voice was ice. We need to talk about the man in that video." Evelyn set down her book. "His name is Damon. He's a con artist. He's after your money. This is exactly how these people operate." "These people?" Evelyn's voice sharpened. "Say what you mean, Garrett." "You know what I mean. I've already been evaluated." She stood, drawing herself to full height. 2 independent doctors, cognitive tests, psychological assessments. I am of completely sound mind, and there is nothing either of you can do about it. Silence. "I've changed my will." Her voice didn't waver. "You'll each receive $600,000. The rest goes to cancer research." Lawrence went pale. Garrett's face twisted. "You can't do this." "It's done." The brothers exchanged a look, a silent conversation between men who'd learned to communicate without words. Calculation. Desperation. Rage. Garrett turned back to his mother. "We need to stop this," he said quietly. Evelyn thought he meant the conversation. She was wrong. March 12th, 2024. 2 days after the birthday party. 4 people sat in Garrett Carrington's living room, and not one of them was grieving. Vanessa Carrington paced by the fireplace, her heels clicking against the hardwood. She'd been beautiful once, still was, in that polished, maintenance-intensive way that required trainers and dermatologists and a closet full of designer clothes. Clothes she'd already mentally allocated from Evelyn's estate. "How much?" she said slowly. "Is she leaving him?" Garrett's jaw tightened. $600,000. "And the rest?" $7 million. Goes to some cancer research fund, named after his dead wife. The room went silent. Lawrence sat on the couch beside his wife Pamela, rubbing his temples like a man with a migraine that wouldn't quit. He'd always been the quieter brother, the follower, the one who let Garrett make decisions and lived with the consequences. "That money is ours." Vanessa's voice was ice. "We've waited years. We have plans, the beach house, the kids' tuition. That inheritance is supposed to be ours." Pamela leaned forward. "Can we challenge the will? Claim she wasn't competent?" "She had 2 independent doctors evaluate her," Garrett said bitterly. "Cognitive tests, psych evaluations. It's legally airtight. Our mother made sure of that." "Then we make sure he can't collect." Everyone looked at Vanessa. She stood by the window now, arms crossed, staring at nothing. "What do you mean?" Lawrence asked. She turned and met her husband's eyes, met Garrett's, said nothing more. She didn't have to. March 14th, 5:47 p.m., Westbrook Rehabilitation Center parking lot. Damon was walking to his car when he saw them. 2 men in expensive suits, leaning against a black Mercedes like they owned the world. He recognized them from photographs in Evelyn's house, her sons, the ones who never called. "Damon Whitfield." Garrett stepped forward. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." $150,000. Garrett pulled an envelope from his jacket, thick, heavy. "Cash. Walk away from our mother. Never contact her again. This conversation never happened." Damon stared at the envelope, at the 2 men who thought they could buy their way out of anything. "You're bribing me. We're offering you a solution. Take the money. Start over somewhere else. Everyone wins." Everyone except Evelyn. Garrett's expression flickered. Annoyance, confusion. Like he genuinely couldn't understand why this wasn't working. $250,000. Final offer. Damon looked at them. These men who saw their mother as an ATM, who saw him as a problem to be solved with cash. He thought about Evelyn, about her laugh, about the way she looked at him like he was the only person in the room. "There isn't one," he said quietly. "I love your mother, and there's no amount of money that changes that." He turned and walked to his car, didn't look back. Behind him, Garrett's face went dark. "You're making a mistake," he called out, but Damon was already gone. March 14th, 9:22 p.m. Garrett sat in his car outside a bar he'd never admit to knowing. He scrolled through his phone, found the number. A pressed call. "Terrence, it's Garrett Carrington. I need to meet. Tonight." The bar was the kind of place that didn't ask questions. Dim lighting, cash only. Patrons who minded their own business because they had business of their own to mind. Terrence Holloway was already in a back booth when Garrett arrived, 39 years old, ex-Army, discharged under other than honorable conditions, something about an incident overseas that never made it into official records. Now he called himself a security consultant. People who knew better called him something else. Garrett slid into the booth, explained the situation, the girlfriend, the will, the money. "He needs to go away," Garrett said. "Permanently." Terrence didn't blink. 100,000. Half now, half after. Deal. March 15th. Garrett withdrew $55,000 in cash, small bills, nothing traceable. He met Terrence in a parking garage and handed over an envelope containing everything: Damon's apartment address, work schedule, car make and model, license plate number. "Underground parking," Garrett said. "No cameras inside the structure. He usually gets home around 8. Terrence studied the information, nodded once. "Give me a week." March 16th through March 21st. Terrence watched. He learned that Damon left work at 7:45 most evenings, that he drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper, that he parked in spot 114 near the elevator in an underground garage with no security cameras and minimal foot traffic after 7 p.m. He learned that Damon sometimes sat in his car for a few minutes before going up, probably calling someone, probably her. Knew he learned that the stairwell door didn't lock properly, that the lighting was poor near the far wall. That sound echoed in concrete spaces but rarely traveled up to the residential floors. By March 21st, Terrence Holloway had everything he needed. The next night, he would use it. March 22nd, 8:14 p.m. The underground garage was quiet. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of traffic overhead. Terrence Holloway stood in the shadows near the stairwell, patient as a predator, watching the entrance ramp. Headlights swept across the concrete walls. A 12-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper pulled into spot 114. Damon Whitfield stepped out of the car, phone pressed to his ear. He was smiling, laughing at something. His voice echoed softly in the empty space. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said. "I love you too." He hung up, slipped the phone into his pocket, started walking toward the elevator. He never heard Terrence coming. The blow came from behind. Something heavy, metal, swung with precision. Damon's legs buckled. He hit the concrete hard, his vision exploding into white static. But he didn't lose consciousness, not completely. Some survival instinct kicked in, something primal, and he tried to push himself up. Terrence was on him in seconds, an arm around his throat, crushing pressure. Damon fought. He clawed at the arm, cutting off his air. His fingernails raked across skin, drawing blood, collecting evidence he would never live to see used. His legs kicked against the concrete. His body bucked and thrashed. But Terrence was stronger, trained, patient. By 8:27 p.m., Damon Whitfield was dead. In his last thought, his very last conscious moment, was of Evelyn, her laugh, her eyes, the way she looked at him like he was the only person in the world. Terrence loaded the body into his trunk, drove 35 miles through the darkness to a wooded conservation area he'd scouted days earlier. He buried Damon in a shallow grave, covered it with branches and leaves, and drove home. The whole thing took less than 4 hours. March 23rd. Evelyn woke up smiling. She dreamed of dancing. She called Damon at 9 a.m. voicemail. She left a message, something playful about breakfast plans, and went about her morning. Called again at noon. Voicemail. Texted. No response. By 3 p.m., something cold had settled in her chest. This wasn't like him. Damon always answered, always called back. She told herself there was an explanation. Phone died. A emergency at work. Something simple. But the cold feeling wouldn't leave. March 24th. Still nothing. Evelyn called Westbrook Rehabilitation Center. They told her Damon hadn't shown up for his shift, hadn't called in sick. His supervisor was worried too. At 11 a.m., Evelyn called the police and reported him missing. At 1:30 p.m., her doorbell rang. She opened it to find Garrett and Lawrence standing on her porch, the first time they'd visited twice in 1 month since Theodore's funeral. "Mom," Garrett said, "we need to talk." Something in his voice made her step back. Let them in. They followed her to the living room where sunlight streamed through windows that suddenly felt too bright. "Damon isn't missing," Garrett said. "He left." Evelyn's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" "We talked to him," Lawrence added. I'm not meeting her eyes. "After the birthday party, we made him an offer." "What kind of offer?" Garrett's expression didn't change. $250,000 to walk away, never contact you again. Evelyn's hands began to shake. "That's not true." "He took it, Mom. He took the money and left." "No." The word came out broken. "No, he wouldn't." March 14th, we met him outside his work, made the offer. He didn't hesitate. Garrett's voice was almost gentle now, almost kind, and that made it worse. "I'm sorry. I know this is hard to hear, but he was never who you thought he was." Evelyn grabbed her phone, dialed Damon's number, voicemail. The same cheerful voice she'd heard 100 times. "Hey, it's Damon. Leave a message." "He's not answering because he's gone," Lawrence said. "He took the money and disappeared." Now that's what people like him do. The room tilted. Evelyn sat down hard on the couch, her legs no longer trustworthy. She thought of every moment they'd shared, every conversation, every kiss, every time he'd refused her gifts, her money, her attempts to give him things. "I don't need your money, Evelyn. I just need you." Had it all been a lie? Had she been that foolish? That desperate? Her sons watched her fall apart. They offered no comfort. They simply waited. At 11:52 that night, Evelyn woke from a nightmare she couldn't remember. Her chest felt tight. Her left arm tingled. She couldn't catch her breath. The ambulance arrived at 12:17 a.m. The paramedics used words she barely understood. Cardiac event, troponin levels, stress cardiomyopathy. The doctors at the hospital gave it another name, Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, a broken heart syndrome. Her heart had literally changed shape, the left ventricle ballooning from grief, unable to pump properly. She spent 4 days in the hospital. Her sons visited once, briefly. They brought flowers. On March 28th, Evelyn returned to her empty house. She walked through rooms that used to feel warm and saw only ghosts. Damon's coffee mug still in the cabinet, the playlist he'd made her, still on her phone, the spot on the couch where they'd watched movies. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped answering when Constance called. March 31st, 3:47 a.m. Evelyn woke with a crushing pressure in her chest. This time, there was no time to call for help. Her housekeeper, Maria, found her at 8:30 a.m., lying in bed, eyes open, one hand reaching toward the nightstand where her phone sat. As if, in her final moments, she'd been trying to call someone. Evelyn Carrington was 71 years old. She died alone, in the bedroom she'd shared with Theodore for 48 years. She died believing the man she loved had abandoned her for money. She never knew Damon refused the bribe. She never knew he was murdered for refusing. She never knew he loved her until his last breath. She died believing she was a fool. And her sons, the men who killed her as surely as they'd killed Damon, inherited nothing but the weight of what they'd done. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. By 6 p.m. on April 15th, the same day Wesley Thornton stumbled across that decomposed hand in the woods, detectives had identified the body. Damon Whitfield, 28 years old, physical therapist. I reported missing 3 weeks earlier by a woman named Evelyn Carrington, a woman who, they soon learned, had died 9 days before the body was found. Detective Angela Morrison started with a simple question: who benefits? The answer led her to Howard Feldstein, Evelyn's attorney for 30 years. He handed over everything: the will, the cognitive evaluations, the family conflict that had been brewing since Theodore Carrington's death. He told her about the sons who rarely visited, about the birthday party, about the relationship that had scandalized everyone except the two people in it. And he told her about Evelyn's final clause: if any person is convicted of any crime related to the harm or death of Damon Whitfield, all bequests to that person are void. Morrison raised an eyebrow. She expected this? Feldstein's face was grim, so she prepared for it. April 16th. The brothers were interviewed separately at the station. Garrett came in wearing a tailored suit, answering questions with the practiced calm of a man who'd done business deals worth millions. Lawrence sat hunched forward, fidgeting, sweating through his collar. Both told the same story. They'd offered Damon money to leave. He took it. End of involvement. But the numbers didn't add up. Phone records showed Garrett calling a burner phone on March 14th, the same day as the bribe attempt. Bank records showed a $55,000 cash withdrawal on March 15th. And when detectives asked why a man would need $55,000 in untraceable bills the day after supposedly paying off his mother's boyfriend, Garrett's practiced calm began to crack. The burner phone became everything. and purchased at a gas station on March 13th, paid for in cash. But the station had cameras, and the cameras had footage. April 20th, detectives identified the buyer, Terrence Holloway, 39, ex-Army, now working as what he called a security consultant. 3 days later, they raided his apartment. They found $47,000 in cash stuffed in a duffel bag under his bed. They found handwritten notes detailing Damon's work schedule, his car, his parking spot. They found the burner phone, still active, still containing text messages to a number registered to Garrett Carrington. Terrence's attorney negotiated within the hour. Full cooperation, complete confession, reduced charges. Garrett Carrington paid me $100,000 to kill Damon Whitfield, Terrence said on the record, his voice flat, detached, like he was describing someone else's crime. $50,000 up front. I watched him for 6 days, learned his patterns, killed him March 22nd in his garage. Blunt force trauma, then strangulation, buried him in the woods. He described it the way a contractor describes installing drywall. May 2nd, 2024. Garrett and Lawrence Carrington were arrested at their homes. The charges: conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree murder, solicitation of murder. They were photographed in handcuffs. These men who'd grown up in private schools, who'd inherited their father's name and their mother's contempt. The images ran on every local news channel. Lawrence's defense was immediate. He didn't know. The bribe was one thing, but murder? That was Garrett's decision. He had no part in it. Then the prosecutors played the text messages. March 14th, 8:47 p.m. Garrett to Lawrence. Plan B is ready. Lawrence's response: Are you sure about this? Garrett: Do we have a choice? March 23rd, 9:12 a.m., the morning after the murder, the morning Evelyn was trying to reach Damon and getting only silence. Garrett to Lawrence: It's done. Lawrence: What do we tell Mom? Garrett: That he took the money and ran. She'll believe it. The courtroom was silent when those messages were read aloud. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Terrence Holloway took the stand and walked the jury through every detail. The meeting at the bar, the cash in the parking garage, the 6 days of surveillance, the final night in the concrete darkness of Damon's apartment building. He described the struggle, the scratches Damon left on his arm, the moment the body went limp. But it was the medical examiner's testimony that broke the room. Evelyn Carrington died of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, Dr. Patricia Hollis stated. It's commonly called broken heart syndrome. The left ventricle of her heart literally changed shape in response to severe emotional stress. The trigger, in this case, was the belief that someone she loved had betrayed her. She paused, looking at the defendants. Her death was a direct result of the lie these men told her. October 18th, 2024. Verdicts. Terrence Holloway: guilty of second-degree murder, 28 years. Garrett Carrington: guilty on all counts, life without parole. Lawrence Carrington: guilty of conspiracy, guilty as an accessory, 30 years. Under the Slayer statute, a law preventing murderers from inheriting from their victims, neither brother would receive a single dollar of their mother's estate. But the clause Evelyn had insisted on activated automatically. All $8.8 million went to establish the Brianna Whitfield Memorial Fund for ovarian cancer research. The money Garrett killed for would now save the lives of women like Damon's wife. The inheritance Lawrence schemed for would fund the research Evelyn chose to honor the man her sons murdered. They'd destroyed their family for nothing. They'd killed a man who loved their mother, broken their mother's heart, and lost everything anyway. Evelyn Carrington, even in death, had gotten the last word. November 2024. The courtroom fell silent as Keandra Williams approached the microphone. She was the closest thing Damon ever had to family, a foster sister from his teenage years, the only person who'd stayed. Her hands trembled. Her voice did not. My brother lost his wife to cancer at 26. Then he met Evelyn. She gave him hope again. She looked directly at Garrett and Lawrence. When her sons offered him $250,000 to leave, he refused. He didn't want money. He wanted her. She paused. Let the words land. They killed him for that. Then they let Evelyn die believing he'd abandoned her. They took everything from both of them. For money they'll never see. Her voice cracked. My brother died believing Evelyn would find him, that she'd know the truth. Instead, she died thinking he betrayed her. They both died alone, thinking the worst of each other. She wiped her eyes. That's what Garrett and Lawrence Carrington did. They destroyed the memory of love. Evelyn Carrington was 71 years old, fully competent, evaluated by doctors. But she chose Damon Whitfield. She chose happiness. Her sons decided they knew better, decided their mother couldn't possibly love a man 43 years younger, decided it had to be about money, because the alternative, that she was simply happy, was unacceptable. The $8.8 million now funds ovarian cancer research. The charity they tried to prevent will save lives for decades. Every grant, every breakthrough, every woman who survives, that's Damon's legacy. That's Evelyn's final word. And Garrett and Lawrence, they'll spend their lives in prison knowing they destroyed their entire family for an inheritance they'll never touch. The money that was supposed to be torn apart by greed is instead saving lives in Brianna's name, in Damon's honor, in Evelyn's memory. I'll see you in the next one.